Hi everyone. Thank you for choosing to listen to me for the next 20 minutes. I'm going to talk to you about how I'm still smiling through tragedy and turmoil. I'm going to do that by first very briefly introducing you to who I am and give you some insight into my own relatively recent experiences of tragedy. I'll then focus the majority of this 20-minute talk on what I think is the really important stuff, which is what I've learned about myself, about my life, why I think that even now I'm able to look forward with a degree of hope and optimism. So, first of all, let me just introduce myself. So, my name's Andy Withers. I'm a Googler. I've been at Google for coming up to 3 years now. Very exciting being part of Google, but it's been an interesting personal journey for me while I've had my first 3 years at Google. So I'm married. I'm married to Ellen.
Here's a result from search.
Oh, excuse me. I said Google. Don't do that. I'm married to Ellen. I remarried in 2015. So I have 2 children from my first marriage, Owen and Izzy. I've got 2 stepchildren from my wife's first marriage. They're Oliver and Grace. And I've got 1 5-year-old, Oscar, who Ellen and I have had together. We've also got a French bulldog called Eric. And we've got quite a lot of cats. I think we've got 6 at the moment. We foster cats for the local cat rescue. So quite a busy house. I was born in the north of England, well, the middle of England really, but given that I live in London now, people refer to it as the north. I was born in the north of England in the 1970s, mid to late 70s, so I'm in my 40s now. I had older parents, so my mum and dad, June and Terry, they were 40 and 41 respectively when I was born. I've got older siblings. I had an older brother called Dave, who was 18 years older than me when I was born. I've got 2 sisters, Julie and Linda. They are 14 years older than me. A fairly normal working class background. My mum was a school cook. My dad was a school caretaker, maintenance man, so working class background. I was one of, I think, only 2 other people across all of my kind of cousins, aunts, uncles to go to university. Going to university, getting an education or higher education wasn't really the norm in my family. My parents brought us up, my parents were fantastic parents. They brought us up with a really strong emphasis on humility, compassion, kindness, respect. So we didn't have a lot as kids, but it was a really happy childhood. And like I say, all of those things were kind of foundational in what my parents taught us all. It's fair to say that in the last few years I've had some dark times. I guess this is going to sound a bit rushed because we've only got 20 minutes and so much has happened. 20 minutes really isn't enough time to do that justice. So apologies for that. But after losing my grandparents in the kind of 90s, 2000s, which is kind of what you expect as you're growing up. You expect to lose the kind of older generation first. But after that, tragedy really struck my kind of immediate family in 2012. So what's that, 8 years ago now? And that was with my dad being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Not long after that, my mum was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And then 2 weeks after her diagnosis, she very suddenly passed away. I wasn't there when she passed away. At the time, I lived about 200 miles away. By the time I got there, after hearing that she was in hospital, she'd been rushed to hospital. By the time I got there, she'd gone. that was a massive blow to the whole family. She was really the kind of matriarch of the family. She was the linchpin of my extended family. So her dying was a fairly significant event in the whole of my family. My dad, unfortunately, he followed her in 2013, so he'd been unwell for a while, and he passed away while I was out of the country. So I wasn't there when he passed away either. So lost both of my parents within the space of a year. I'd been really unhappy in my first marriage. I'd been really unhappy for a really long time, and mum and dad passing away definitely gave me perspective. It gave me the perspective that I needed really to break out of a relationship that I'd been really unhappy in, and so I'd got divorced, and moved away and left my two children behind as well, and my two older children. So that was a really, really rough time. In 2014, I met my wife Ellen. Fell madly in love. To this day feel really lucky to have met her, and for her to be a part of my life. And then not long after meeting her, very suddenly out of the blue, my brother died of a heart attack, and I wasn't there when he died either. So that was a complete kind of curveball and came out of nowhere. In late 2014, so after David died, Ellen and I found out we were expecting our youngest son, Oscar. We got married, and Oscar was born in the middle of 2015. Then, kind of early 2016, Ellen was taken ill, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer. That was another massive upheaval in our lives. She went through treatment, surgery. That took us all the way through 2016 in a bit of a blur. And then in 2017, not a lot happened. We kind of bumbled through that year, I think, feeling a little bit punch drunk. So much had happened over the previous years. I'd also been quite unhappy with the job that I was in at the time, and again, all of the things that had happened, the whole diagnosis, treatment, and the pain that we'd been through with Ellen's diagnosis, losing my brother Dave, all of that was another sense of perspective and another reset. So I quit my job to go after something exciting and to go and do something that I really wanted to do. I applied to Google, and then in late 2017 I got my offer, and I started at Google in January of 2018. And then in August 2018, so a few months after joining Google, a few weeks after my 42nd birthday, after suffering a migraine for a solid 5 days, we were all sat at the dinner table one evening, and Izzy, my oldest daughter, didn't look very well, and just vomited everywhere. No warning, just projectile vomiting. So we knew something wasn't right. We rushed her to the hospital, and thus began the most traumatic period of my life, definitely. Moving around hospitals, scans, tests, treatments, surgeries, and a terminal diagnosis. So she was told that she had a fairly aggressive, untreatable brain tumour, and was given a terminal diagnosis. It was less about whether she was going to die, it was more about how long it was going to take for her to die, and she was told to basically make the most of the next few months. All of that for a bright, confident, beautiful 16-year-old girl who kind of had her whole life ahead of her. that was so hard for us to take. I can't imagine what it would have felt like for her. We did as much of our bucket list as we could. We were helped by some amazing generosity by the people at Google, our colleagues in GCP, in Apogee. But in early 2019, she could no longer walk. She couldn't use the left side of her body. She moved into an amazing hospice where a few months later, 11 months after her diagnosis, so just short of a year, she passed away. And that was August last year, 2019. So what remains? I'm kind of left with not so much loss. I mean, obviously there's loss, and the loss is awful. But I think the prominent thing that remains with me is I'm just haunted by the feelings of suffering that she went through, that my mum might have gone through, that my brother might have gone through, that my dad went through. All of that suffering weighs really heavy on me. I've learnt that the way those feelings kind of ebb and flow over time is really profound. But as somebody who, on a really personal level, when I do personality tests, like True Colours, Myers-Briggs, those types of personality tests, the overwhelming sort of characteristic that comes out for me is empathy. I'm an empathetic person, and so I'm left with this feeling of how awful things must have been, wondering how they coped, knowing that they were gonna die, wondering what it feels like to kind of slowly lose yourself, and with it your hope. I'm kind of left wondering. So how am I still smiling given all of that? I think there's so much, but what I want to talk about are the five things really or the five main things that kind of jump out to me as things that I've observed as being super important to helping me to maintain a positive attitude. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the most positive, outgoing. I'm not bright. I don't smile all the time. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying to have hope that the future is going to be positive, given all of that. The first thing is be around people that compliment you. And I don't mean be around people that say nice things to you. I mean be around people that balance you. Be around the yings to your yang. Be around people who are really kind of in it with you. They might not be the people that you'd expect. One of the things that I've noticed over all of the things that have happened is that often the people that you expect to be there are not the ones that really are, and the ones that you didn't expect to be are often step up to the plate. So be around people that compliment you, and turn to people for support, talk to people. Counselling is a really big one for me. Over the last year in particular, I've spent a lot of time with a counsellor, and being able to talk to somebody who's objective is really, really powerful. The second thing that stands out to me is be mindful of the effect that people have on your life. So there are people in your life that kind of fill your cup, and then there are people in your life that drain your cup. Both Ellen and I, over the last few years, have become much more selective about who we let into our lives. Do they fill our cup? That's the question that we ask ourselves. Because when your emotional energy is really low, what you need around you are people that feed you with positivity, not people that drain you. So be mindful of the people that you have around you in your day-to-day life. The third thing is immerse yourself in the things that you love. Have hobbies, do things that excite you. I've found over the last year, I've found a reinvigorated love for mountain biking, that I kind of left behind 20 years ago. So getting into things that you find interesting, and that occupy your mind and your hands, and immerse yourself in things that you really love doing. I've got a camper van. I love getting out and camping with the family, I immerse myself in my family's lives. They're off at university, they're off at school, they're at football, we're taking them to football, gymnastics, martial arts, those kinds of things. I play guitar. Immerse yourself in music. I love golf. Go play golf. Even when it's raining, go play golf, go ride your bike. Do things that fill your cup. The next thing that strikes me, and it's a bit unique, but I know how to do this, the whole loss, grief thing, as with anything, the more you exercise the muscle, the stronger it gets. The more aware you are of what's likely to come, the more perspective that gives you, and it means that you can ride the less bad things. My loss has gotten progressively harder as time has moved on. I lost my grandparents first, and then I lost my parents, and then I lost a sibling, and then I lost a child. And while you don't like to compare those things, that's kind of the natural order of events. Nobody expects to lose a child. You don't really expect to lose a sibling, but you can kind of understand the fact that grandparents and parents pass away first. So that's enabled me to ramp up my ability to deal with it. So that's not something you have a choice about, but it's definitely something that I've observed about me. Also, another point is I try not to allow myself to feel guilty for being happy. I'm certainly not happy all the time. I'm definitely happier now, less frequently than I used to be, although I'm confident that that's going to kind of improve over time. But we spend a lot of time thinking about, what would Izzy have wanted? Would she want us to be unhappy, or would she have expected us to go out and be happy? Would my parents want us to be happy? Would my brother want us to be happy? Of course they would. So don't feel guilty for feeling happy. And then the last point, and probably the most significant point, is consciously try to focus on the good times. So there are memories that leave you kind of warm and lifted inside, and then there are other memories that leave you cold and low. Surround yourself with reminders of the good times, such as photos. We have photos plastered all over the house that remind us of all the good times that we had together. It hurts at first, it's really painful, but that passes over time. It gets progressively easier, and you learn to live alongside those good memories. So make space for the good memories and try to limit, on the flip side of that, try to limit the reminders of the bad. I've lost 4 grandparents, 2 parents, a sibling, a child, 8 people. The hardest times for me are the birthdays, Christmas, because there are so many memories.
Here's an answer from Cora.
Let's Google again. There are so many of memories, and that's, if you add all of that up, that's 9 separate days out of the year, Christmas and birthdays for all those people, where I'm in pain. And each one of those days, depending on how recent the loss was, it has like this kind of residual number of days either side of it where it hurts as well. So if you take Christmas as an example, I tend now to only acutely feel the loss of my grandparents on Christmas itself, whereas I'm in pain over Izzy in the weeks before Christmas and the weeks after Christmas. So when you multiply all of that up, all of these periods of pain, if you allow them to not just include Christmas and birthdays, but also, I don't know, the anniversaries of the dates that they passed away, the anniversaries of the dates of their funerals, the dates they were diagnosed, you can easily see this multiplying effect, and it has a really significant impact on your life. So I choose to kind of limit my exposure to reminders. I delete anniversaries like these from my calendar. I remove the on this day reminders from Facebook, from my Facebook feed, and talk to your family and friends about it as well. They can't support you if they don't know what you want, if they don't know that you're trying to focus on the positive and not the less positive memories. But that consciously trying to focus on good times has been a really powerful but really quite hard thing to do. And that's it for me. So before I go, I just wanted to leave you with a couple of quotes that I found really profound from two people who I've got an enormous amount of respect for. The first one is from Hannah Gadsby and her Netflix special, Nanette, where she says, "To be rendered powerless does not destroy your humanity. Your resilience is your humanity. To yield and not break, that's incredible strength." There's so much in that special that's profound, but that for me, that really stands out. And the others are from an ex-Googler who you may have heard of, who I've got an enormous amount of respect for, Mo Godat. And he says, happiness follows a very simple equation. Your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events in your life and your expectations of how your life should be. So in other words, happiness is not what life gives you. Happiness is what you think about what life gives you. It's basically saying try to have a positive mental attitude, and I love that idea. So thank you so much for listening. And if any of that turns out to be useful to you, then you've given me even more reason to smile. So thank you. I'd be happy to hear from any of you, whether that's feedback to this talk or questions, or just wanting to talk. I'm happy for any of you to reach out. Take care.